that. And so I also started a group twice a week where they got 4 hours of free respite care. They can drop their kids off and go. Take their typically developing kid out, whatever they want to do. If they want to go home for 2 hours and take a nap, I really didn't care. I had their kids and I watched them for those 2 hours because they needed that break. So anyways, let's get started. So my issue is that raising a child with a disability puts a significant strain not only on the parents, physical and mental well-being. Like that affects the whole parent. And so just because they get this diagnosis, now what do you do? I mean, that's a huge burden on these parents. First-time parents, whatever, third-time parent, it's a big burden. It comes with a lot. So that's the issue. So my purpose of my study was to look at how these parents cope. And then I also want to know, well, does mothers cope differently than fathers? We all cope differently. You guys are all under stress somewhere through school. I know I was always under stress. We all do different ways to coping. I used to get my nails done all the time. That was my way of coping. Still do, just because I work with kids now and I still go get them done. But these parents also need a way to cope too. They're just like us, but their burden's bigger. So I also wanted to look at, so does it affect also their overall well-being too? So let's look at a disability. What's the definition according to ADA? It's anything that's a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or major life activities and has a record of such impairment or is regarded as having an impairment. Coping strategies is an active process that they use to help manage their stress level going on. And that's anything. We're all different. We all use something different, whatever it may be. That's exactly like these parents. I know when my mom was having to work with my brother and I, it was very frustrating to her because she understands everything. It's typical for her to process everything. I process everything too, just like you guys. I just have to learn it differently. That's the difference. It takes more for me to learn it. That's the difference. So for my mom to have to work with my brother and I, it was frustrating to her because she could not get us. So unless you've really worked with a kid or you've talked to these parents, you don't know what a day's like in our shoes. I can tell you all about it. Until you really get to work with me, you don't know what my day's like. It's different, but I still work the same. I still work. I still got my master's. Like, I'm still normal. I'm normal on the outside. Just up in the brain is different. So, anyways, review the literature. So, in the literature, the negative coping styles really have an effect on them. They become depressed. And so these parents need a way to cope. And also, it affects the whole family, just not that child. It affects the whole family. We have a middle brother. Normal, typically developing. So we hated him, just because he learned so easy. I mean, that's how we did. My brother and I, who didn't learn normal, were like, he passed all his tests. You know, like that was frustrating to us. And so he didn't get it. So, but whatever, we passed. My brother's at Western now. So, I mean, we made it because we're out to prove wrong. So, anyways, go ahead. So we're going to look at the different types of coping strategies that were used in my thesis that the parents were allowed to mark on the survey, what they used. Transformations is identification of a positive or significant change in the lives of parents who have a child with a disability. Escape avoidance is the parents take to avoid any support system. These are the parents that just like go away. They're like, yep, my child over there probably has Down syndrome. I'm just going to look past it. Whatever. You know, they don't want to accept it. No parent wants to accept it, but that's the only way you can really cope is the way I feel. If you don't accept it, then you got to start somewhere. All right, positive reappraisal is seeking new faith, growth, discovery is a way to cope with stress. Amazing. You're finding the positive in your kid. There's always a positive in your kid. Yeah, a child with autism may never drive a car, but they probably just said their first word, and that's pretty cool, because that's a big step in their life. And so that's what the parents got to think about. Adaptive coping is finding resources and support to help with the stress. There's so many resources out there, but if you live in a little community like here, you gotta dig sometimes. You know, if you come from a bigger city like Chicago or whatever, yeah, they got a little bit more resources, but you gotta find the right ones that work for your family. That's what you gotta do. Control the partner, so you don't have control of your kid. So I'm gonna just control my partner over here because that will be easy for me. That's something I can't control. I couldn't control my child having a disability.
I didn't click, I don't know what to do.
partner. So this is the partner that is, okay, I get it. My kid's got a disability. I understand it, but my wife over here is not understanding it. I'm going to help her. I'm going to support her. I'm going to do anything I can in order for her to accept our child, because that's huge. Positive reappraisal is having positive thoughts when thinking about their child. Gotta have positive. There's always positives in these kids. They're just not the big major milestones that you guys have all hit. Yeah, they probably will never go to college. But oh well, we got up to 8th grade. We're doing pretty good. We got through high school, because they stay in high school till they're 21. Now what are we gonna do? I work with a family now that is already planning, their child's in 2nd grade. They're moving houses. They're already planning for their house to have a separate place, an apartment, still attached to the house, but they're already looking for the long road because they don't want their child to go to a group home. So I'm like, that is so cool. Like, you're an advocate for your kid. You're already thinking ahead for him because they know he's not going to go to that group home. They're going to stay with him. But they want him to be independent. They want him to cook. They want him to learn that laundry. Those are big steps in his life. Positive reinterpretation is taking something good out of what has happened. There's always good in these kids. They're amazing kids. Coping self-efficacy is an internal coping mechanism where one believes that you can handle anything. I'm confident that I can deal with unexpected events concerning my child with Down syndrome. Reframing is looking at problems in a positive and accepting way as opposed to a negative manner.
That's where I have the video clip. Whoops. It's gonna work, I swear to God. How do I make it to sound?
It sounds okay.
Okay, are you sure?
Could be louder, but I mean, you can't.
It's up as loud as it can go on here.
There's a place on the left side, there's a speaker thing.
In the video?
The bar.
Gotcha.
It's all the way, yeah. It's all right. We'll have to straighten it. You can enlarge the picture, that'd be good.
Yeah, I don't know how to make it. I'm sorry, you guys.
Bottom right square, yep.
No, not that. The sound. I don't know how to make it better. This may not have been the best idea. It seemed like a good idea last night.
That happens a lot at school too, when the kids are like, and you're like, come on. It's you too, it's not you.
You guys can come in and sit. You don't have to stand. I promise.
Okay, well, why don't I just pause this for a bit and we'll come back.
Little break.
We'll see if it works, yeah.
Yeah, never mind.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So active avoidance is actively avoiding the problem and stress by ignoring or self-medicating with drugs or alcohol. You just escape. You could drink that alcohol, you're like, well, I'm gone for about 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it may be, how much you drank, pass out, whatever. You forget about your kid, which isn't great.
A lot of times, like, one spouse will bury themselves at work, and if the mom's the caregiver as well, that's really hard on her when she has no support.
Yes, yes. Planful problem solving involves a deliberate problem solving plan. These are the guys that are the advocates for the kids. These are the ones like, okay, great, my kid's got a child with Down syndrome, fine, what are we gonna do now? We got an IEP going, you know, maybe they're already in school, they got that diagnosis. And so they start that plan. They get their speech therapist, they get their DTs. I mean, they pull in all the resources they can because they're gonna do everything in their power. These are the advocate parents that aren't gonna let anything stop them. And that was my mom to a T. She was not gonna let anyone tell her otherwise. The principal didn't want to work with her, fine, so she gathered outside resources to get me tested. Same thing with my brother. Nobody wanted to listen to her, so she put her foot down until she got what she wanted with us. So, anyways, emotion-oriented coping is utilizing activities that will produce positive emotion reactions. You're using anything. We hold, at the daycare, they hold family nights. Just for all these families to come together and talk. Because a lot of these families feel you don't get what they're talking about because you don't have a child with ADHD. And they shut down. But if they can talk to another parent that has a child with ADHD, they can maybe compare just a little bit. Social diversion is when a parent talks to or visits a family member, which I've talked to a couple parents, a lot of parents I've worked with. Some parents don't like to talk to family members because they are afraid of how their family is going to treat their child. So they would rather go to outdoor resources than talk to family members because of that shame they feel with the family. Escape avoidance refers to parents physically and mentally avoiding the stressful situation. So previous research has looked at mothers and fathers coping with day-to-day stress. With research that I found, most of the studies didn't just focus on coping strategies. They looked at the sibling relationships, they looked at the stress, they looked at the behavior. Yeah, but what's coping? What are these parents doing? They have to cope. So my study, we looked at the disabilities with their experiences, look at how they cope, whether there's differences in the mothers and fathers, and if it affected their physical and mental health. So with my research, it was a mixed research. It's quantitative and qualitative. It was anonymous questionnaires. I had a meeting with all these families at the daycare center, and I sat down and I said, look, this is what my study's doing. I want more information. Are you guys able to be participants? Kind of thing. We kind of explained what we were going to do, what we were looking at, and they were given envelopes with the surveys in it. And I asked them to do them separately because I didn't want mother's influence on dad, vice versa. It could be any parent, any caregiver. We didn't have any rules. It was just a caregiver. So, and then they were asked if they wanted to be part of the $25 gift card. They could send an email to a separate, completely separate, just to get them to do it. Because everybody needs a $25 gift card. So that my instrument was the Hospital Revised Cope Survey, which we pulled from Carver and Shear, who actually did the Cope instrument. But then we kind of tweaked it. We had 25 items on there. 2 of them were open-ended questions. And then I also collected demographics. I wanted to know their age. I wanted to know all that good stuff. So my sample was 25. Very small, which bummed me out, but it's a start. 25, the average age was 36, mostly female. Typical. Caucasian, 80% have more than one child, and then 68% have more than one child with disability. So, that's pretty cool. So these families aren't just having one kid. And you tend to see that in families. If they got one, they usually have 2. The health was measured on a Likert scale, temperate Likert scale, 1 through 10, 1 being poor, 10 being excellent. And the mean was a 7.4, along with their physical was 7.4. So these parents are pretty healthy. So which I was like, yes, they are not using drugs or alcohol to cope here. I was pretty excited with that. So my first research question was, which coping strategies were used the most frequently? We ran frequencies on all those coping strategies, and it was basically yes or no. And this is what we found. Talking to a family member was 76%. Which I was interested, because that was quite interesting to me, knowing my information prior, knowing that they didn't like to talk to people. I found that quite interesting. And planning and acceptance, I was like, yes, they're actually accepting their kids. Like, that's big. Because that, I feel, is the number 1 step in these parents. You gotta accept that child so you can work forward. So, I'll let you guys read the rest.
I forgot to mention on the handout, there's an email address for both of us. So if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, just shoot us an email. We'll send it to you. Of course. So this is the second time we can maybe talk about the ones that reuse the least.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know you switched it on me yet. So here's my second slide, which I found this pay attention to this. Escape avoidance was 8%. And like I said, escape avoidance is parents physically and mentally avoiding the stressful situation. So they're checking out, but that's 8%. But it comes into play later. Which, everything else is pretty okay. kind of where I predicted them to be. So research question 2 is, were the gender differences in the coping strategies that were used? So we ran chi-squares and all that good statistics stuff with all the coping strategies. And this is what we found. We found that females were more likely than males, nothing new, to use adaptive coping. And adaptive coping, to go back to what that means, is finding resources and support to help cope with stress. Yay, moms! You're being that advocate for your parents, for your kids, I mean. And that females were more likely to talk to friends outside the family. Well, we all know females are just talkers to begin with. So we're gonna talk, we're gonna vent, we're gonna get our information out there to whoever's gonna listen to us because we got stress going on in our life. And females were more likely than males to use planning. Well, yeah, we do. We like to plan. We like to have a schedule. We like to know what's going on. We want to know what our kid's gonna do. So they're planning for the future and what the kid needs. Research question 3 is, which coping mechanisms predicted the overall physical and mental health? So again, more statistic, good stuff. 2 separate regression models were tested with all the different coping strategies. Independent variables were used against each health as the dependent variables. So for physical health, there was only one big significant one, and that was talking to family members was a positive on their physical health. All right, I'm glad they're taking care of themselves physically because they're being able to talk and get out their stress that they're having. And so there was a 20% variance in that. Mental health, this is what's interesting. That's why I told you to pay attention to escape avoidance, because they found that positive reinterpretation and escape avoidance had a positive effect on their mental health. It was like, whoa, what is going on here? Because positive reinterpretation is taking something good about what is happening, so they're finding those positives, but then escape avoidance is they're avoiding any support system. And this is playing a positive role, where that was 8%. It was quite mind-blowing. We were both like, what is going on here?
We kept running it again and again.
We did. How many times we ran it? Like 3 or 4 times, just because we're like, did we push something in wrong? Like, what is happening? So, very interesting to see in my research. We were quite amazed. So, my findings were consistent with the previous research that you have to accept the child with a disability. That's the most important thing in order to cope with these parents. And then it's linked to fewer depressive symptoms. Coping strategies that were used least in the sample was escape avoidance, but it had that positive effect on the mental health. So, I don't know. The mothers in the studies were more likely than fathers to use the adaptive coping, talking to friends, and planning. Why? Because moms like to talk. Probably. I mean, great. I'm glad they're talking. Talking to family members, that doesn't surprise me, had a positive effect. And clearly talking to others really does help them. So, recommendations for this. Social agencies really need to include the fathers. I really pushed the fathers when I worked at the daycare center to be involved in these kids' lives. But really, the fathers never really came around, which was really interesting. Because typically, if you see it in the child, you also see it in the father. And I mainly work with kids with autism. So if we saw characteristics, the child was already diagnosed with autism, we saw the same characteristics in dad. It was very interesting to watch. So dad never came around. Why? Because he's got probably some social delays. Like a child with autism. Also, support groups allow parents to talk to other people that are going through the same thing. That's why I love family night. These parents had smiles on their faces. They had their typically developing children. They had their atypically developing children, and they were all there together, talking about whatever underneath the sun. And it didn't have to be about the kid. It could be whatever we were doing. They just are having a boo bash, I think next weekend. Just a Halloween party. You know, for the kids. Great. Allow them to dress up. They probably won't dress up because that's too tight for them. Some will, some won't. It depends on the child. But it's great. And it's great for the parents to come out. Perhaps the parents should try to take a mental break. Escape 20-30 minutes. We all need a break in the day. 20-30 minute break. That's why you get breaks during work. You just need a mental break. So.
And maybe that's how they were interpreting the avoidance. Like, that was our guess. You work with the data.
So my limit and recommendations, it was a cross-sectional, it was a convenient sample. It was small. I didn't have much diversity in it. They were primarily white. It needs to go bigger. And it was primarily quantitative. So we needed to do the sit down with the interviews and focus groups and all that good stuff, get more into their heads. But this is just like this. I couldn't go that far. Is there a question?
Let me-
Ask away.
Let me see if I can get the clip up first. Where did it go? What happened? I lost it. Is this it?
There.
There you go. It's still loading.
Oh my god, you guys.
Sometimes you have to close it down and go back and do it again, and then sometimes you can jump in.
Well, can you just Google YouTube or do YouTube and then just punch in the video title, go that route?
Yeah, what is it?
Instead of clicking the link.
Why am I looking at the one up here? I can look down here.
I know, I was doing
Oh my god, I can't even type that. I can never type when someone's watching.
We'll look away. You have Graker, that's why, Gracre, that's why it's not, you don't have Grace up there. It says Gacre.
Oh.
There you go. Pays to be farsighted.
Let's see if I can get just that one.
Okay, okay.
At the Watershed, we believe in recovery. We believe that every alcoholic and addict deserves the opportunity to heal. Our team of addiction professionals.
I don't think we have the wire. I see where the audio goes, but I don't think it came with the system.
Maybe you can turn it up on your computer as well,
It's-
on the
it's
bottom
up.
toolbar.
As far as it will go.
No matter how close the situation seems, time to get help is now.
Skip that.
It's completely hate magnets.
Hmm.
If home remedies and acne treatments aren't worth
What's happening? Okay, forget it. Let's just go to questions.
Leave it up there while we're looking.
Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment because I've been under pressure with a son who had 2 significant learning disabilities. One was auditory processing and one is short-term memory. There was another time in my life where his grandmother, my mother, came to live with me, which was unexpected, and it was going to be for a short time. It turned out to be longer. Even going for a walk with the dog and enjoying the fall weather and disengaging your mind from the fact that you have all these problems does make a huge difference. And, you know, even getting together, you know, even with the child, you're not just engaging with the child, you're enjoying them as they are. You're not thinking and preoccupying about how is he going to get through school, is he going to get his homework in, and la la la, you know, and I think that's the difference. So I'm wondering if there's a difference, if somebody could do even a better, not a better, but I mean a more in-depth of just that one, if you want to go further. And I bet you people that do it that way are better off than the ones that do it the negative disengaging way, where they even are in denial and don't help. But unfortunately, it was all wrapped into this. So I think it's significant that we take a break and rest, but yet we are still advocating for our kids. You know, so I love your research. It's awesome.
Thank you.
And that's one of the issues with quantitative data collection.
Mhm.
When you give somebody a survey, you can still define it for them, but a lot of times they still have in their head what it means,
Mm-hmm.
even though you're trying to say, this is what it means. And that happened, I know in my own master's thesis, I had an issue with the way I measured control. So I think when you need the qualitative data to kind of go in and say, can you tell me more about this? You know, what does it mean by escape avoidance? What do you mean by that? What are you doing? Because for it to have a positive effect was unexpected. Which happens.
How many were surveyed again?
25.
Where are you working right now? Are you still doing something with autism or?
I work at a daycare center up in Bloomington Rural. I teach 8 months to 18 months school. That's my classroom. I love it. They do primary caretaking where I work. So I have 3 boys right now that are mine, and I do everything for them. But I'm in a classroom of 12. So, but I still work with them. One of those families are there. I do see all my kids still. I love it. I got a passion for them. So, did it through high school, did through everything. So.
I got you, like, so I missed your specific issue, you and your brothers? You were mentioning
I was
learn
di-
differently?
Diagnosed with learning disability.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy. Auditory processing for sure. My brother ADHD and learning disability as well. Except for he just at college you have to be retested to get your accommodations again, and he was just actually retested, and they said he grew out of ADHD. So he was only diagnosed with learning disability this round, which we all were quite shocked
Yeah.
that happened. But he did. I don't know how you grow out of it. So, but all I could say is props to my mom because she got us the help, got us the tutors, got us whatever we needed, and he was able to overcome it, is what I could say.
Nice.
So we were quite proud.
What brings the rest of you here? I know a lot of you are students at, maybe in Dr. Duncan Lane's class. Just, was there an interest specifically in this topic? Like, are any of you wanting to go work with children with disabilities, or?
I had an interest because I have a 4-month-old, and I feel like she's not moving fast enough, like she's not holding a bottle or she's not sitting up. And at 4 months, you probably should be doing that. So I'm always scared. Like I always ask her daycare provider, like, is she on time or is she moving fast enough? Like I'm always scared that something is not gonna be right.
Did you check with the
She's
doctor?
okay at 4 months old. My 9-month-old still ain't holding a bottle. It's typical.
They do have individual development.
They do, and she'll
trajectories.
catch up if anything. But honestly, I wouldn't worry about her not holding a bottle. She knows you're gonna hold it, so why is she gonna worry? You know, my 9-month-old is still doing it. He just lays there like this. It's like, come on, I know you can hold this, but you don't want to. You know, so you just give in, and here's your bottle. Here we go. So I wouldn't stress. But 4 months, that's fun age.
Okay.
Unless you're seeing other things. I don't
That
know
was
your
it.
I know your child. I'm not a doctor, but whatever.
I have a question. I was wondering, as far as the families that were able to seek resources or willing to go do it, was there a difference in maybe like their financial statuses or like because some of the things that I've heard like from poor families is, oh, I can't afford resources for my kid, but when you talk to wealthier families, they're like, oh, there's only so much stuff out there for poorer families. So I was wondering, like, was that a factor?
We didn't look at that, but I know I've talked about that in my disadvantaged family class before, and how there are resources out there. Lots of times they're free regardless of income level. You can seek out a support group or get help. But the two extremes there, the wealthy families versus families that are not wealthy, see each other's experiences as very different. And it's true, if you have a good income, then you're able to access more resources. You can hire help. You can hire people to come in and help you with the caregiving, cleaning the house, or doing other things so you can focus. And those things matter. And the research shows those families cope better than the families that are lower income, and they may still be accessing resources, but they can't hire that extra help or get those extra, some of the accommodations are very expensive too. Having to get a van that may have a lift and putting in a ramp or widening doorways, depending on the nature of the disability, that can get pricey.
It does. Well, you don't even pay. You have to pay out of pocket to get a psychologist test you if you go outside your school system. So my mom paid twice and paid again the third time for him to be tested. Yep, because the school didn't want to listen. But typically your psychologist at your school should test you. You have to listen.
I know that the research was about the parents' coping styles, but have you observed how the child reacts if the parents don't cope well? Like you had a really good experience, but children whose parents have negative coping styles, what the effect is on them?
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. The kids are a tendency more to lash out. They have more aggressive behaviors, and they don't know how to control it. But then the parents are mad because sometimes kids with autism, they're biters. It's fun in daycare world because they're biters. There's a lot of sensory going on in your mouth, and so you're sitting over there playing with that nice toy, but I got this oral stimulation that I need to fix now, so I'm gonna go bite you just because it's today. So for those parents to cope with that. And so that's the negative behavior for these parents that aren't coping because these kids are lashing.
So would that be like the child's coping style?
Yeah,
Like
mhm.
learn from the parents?
They're not getting the attention they need. They're not getting what they're needing. They're needing to seek a speech therapist is what they're needing. But the parents aren't wanting to accept that their kid's got a disability, so then they're not getting that resource in order to fix that problem. So it goes down the line. It does. It plays a game.
That totally answers my question because I have a nephew who is in Champaign right now, just like trying to deal with autism and everything, and that's how he lashed out with fighting and everything. He's 7. Or going, he's 7.
It's very typical behavior. So you do have biters in all classrooms, don't get me wrong. It's a typical development. You're gonna have, when you have kids, they're gonna start biting. It's just part of it. It's part of the teething thing. My room is a teething world. They sometimes get 1 tooth in, sometimes they get 5. So not every kid has autism. It's just normal.
He was diagnosed.
But he was diagnosed. But typically you see that in autism. They're biting. It's a behavior.
So what do you do with that? Like, do you go see a specialist? Speech therapist?
Yeah, I would start talking to a developmental therapist. Get to work with them. And if they can't help, okay, well, refer me to someone else. Then I want to go see a speech therapist. If that's not working, well, then we're going to take it somewhere else. Is he needing more, maybe just gross motor? Maybe more fine motor? Is he just needing a teether? I mean, it could get down to that, just that pressure, being able to relieve it. But not all the time do the teethers work. That friend still over there looks way better to buy than eating this teether.
At 6 years old though?
And they have these, you put it on like a bandana, and it's like a plastic tube, and they can just put it in their mouth. It's like you don't call it passy, but it's a big tube where that can just stick in their mouth, and it's something just to chew on throughout the day. And yeah, they're gonna drool, so you put a bib on them, or you just put a bigger bandana on them, and allow them to chew on it, and that really helps them too. We have a couple kids that use that. It's something a speech therapist will work with.
Going on with that, I do autism movement therapy, and there's a little boy from downstairs, but he went to it and he was a biter. We had him on the floor, and I was sitting with him, and he wanted to move, and I told him he couldn't, and right on my arm. But they have it's like a pea, and I think it's like a pica. I don't know what they call it, but if you give them that, they like bite down on it all the time, or there's like different things that you can do.
Oh yeah, there's so many little things that they can use.
Yeah.
Any other questions or discussion? Wanna go back to bed? Can't.
Well, are they allowed to use, like a negative consequence kind of thing within a reasonable, with a kid that's developmentally has this issue? Because I worked as a sub in a daycare center, about almost, 27 years ago. And, they were, the director, she was allowed to use, bitters, I guess is what you use for making alcoholic drinks. You can buy it at a store that sells that, and just a tiny drop administered, it had to be by her, just like paddling's allowed. If they had bitten like 3 times, or the parents knew they had to sign something because it was a daycare center, but they couldn't have these kids continue to bite other kids, and so, but they weren't developmentally delayed, they weren't at all diagnosed with anything like that. And just a drop of that in the tongue. There was only one really chronic biter. It took 2 times of that, and that was it. It cured them. And the parents were so thankful because their kids were running around biting, kids in their neighborhood and at family parties. So it did the trick. But I know that sometimes legally that's not allowed with kids that have special education needs. So I'm wondering what the parameters are, for stopping this, because I know it's a negative. If you could stop the behavior, they would also get along better with their peers,
Right.
and more families will want them to engage in play groups, etc. So is there, what are the parameters nowadays with all those kind of issues? I even wonder if that would be legal now as it was back then, I don't know.
I mean, I can't answer for DCFS. It depends on the county sometimes,
Mhm.
even though DCFS has a big thing, but
Mhm.
each rep is different.
Exactly. Oh, they were all legal, and supposedly this was all okay.
I mean, that's awesome, but really,
Yeah, I guess.
you can't find another solution. I mean, that's my opinion. I mean, yeah, you got biters. Yeah, that's normal. That's part of teething world.
That's not.
These were like
the
4,
reason
yeah,
why the source.
yeah, these were more like between 2 and 5-year-olds that were still continuing to bite, you know, and it was more the older ones that were just, you know, out of anger because they couldn't get the trike really fast and the kid wouldn't get off it, that kind of thing, you know, so,
I get discipline.
yeah.
These are the consequences.
Yeah, yeah, timeouts, I guess, not working, so.
Instead of something in the mouth. Nobody wants something in their mouth. That's terrible. But teach your own.
You mentioned a development therapist. Can you explain it a little more?
So these are, you can contact, who is it? Do you have them at, contact the local, I guess your R&R would be the right way to go.
R&R, what does that say?
Child Care Resource and Referral, sorry.
Oh.
And they may provide a list of knowing, or your like local doctor, you know, pediatrician would know a developmental therapist. And there's somebody that would come in your home and they would just work with your kid. And
Okay,
they
I
would
want to know, what is a developmental therapist?
there's somebody who works with them. They work in the growth. They work with getting your child, like, you know, okay, so you got a little bit delay going on. So that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna work on them.
Okay.
To get you up to all your growth standards.
When you like came in contact with parents that had negative coping skills, did you find like maybe I don't know if like this was, if you asked about this or not, but did you find that like maybe they viewed their child as actions as being negative as opposed to being like a kid trying to function, like living in their own world trying to function in what to them is an abnormal society? Does that make sense?
Yeah, can you explain?
it?
Yeah, sorry.
Like when parents have like, okay, like the way that parents view their kids, like you know, you can either think of it as, oh, I have a problem, or you can think of it as my kid just doesn't know how to function in society because of the way they see things. Now, when you came in contact with parents that had negative coping skills, was it because they had like a negative perspective of their child's disability?
Oh yeah, they're completely negative with the child.
Like not understanding, you mean, and just not being acceptable.
Right, like I saw this one video about this mother who, it was like in the 50s or something, and her kid had a disability and she blamed herself because she said that there was something wrong with her kid because of something that happened during her pregnancy. So she didn't think like his developmental stages or whatever were milestones because she viewed it as something being wrong with him.
Right. Instead of that positive reinterpretation or reframing, yeah.
So I was wondering, like, was that like something that was common among parents that had negative coping skills throughout your research?
I don't know if you had a big enough sample to really tap into that. And it was skewed too because there were already people seeking out.
Yeah, they were seeking out resources.
Yeah. So
They were already a part of the daycare center. They were already people using the family nights and using the respite care 4 hours a week.
but I'm sure, I think that's what the literature said, and if they do the negative, a lot of times they're not accepting the child situation. That's like one of the factors for child abuse too, and they don't understand, they think that a 2-year-old is trying to control them, when 2-year-olds are not capable of trying to control adults, but they put those traits on them and then they become abusive because they're like, stop it, and yeah, same idea. Not, if you don't know what they can and can't do at different ages, then it can lead to problems. Said about animals too. Well, we're done a little early, so you guys have a bit more time before the next session starts. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for
very
coming.
much for coming.
Thank you.